Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so happy to have LAPD Chief of Police Michel Moore here with us today. We'll be speaking with Chief Moore in just a few minutes, but first, there was a time not so long ago that liberals and conservatives had the same goals for our country, but had different ideas on how to achieve these goals. We shared freedom, liberty, love of country, law and order. We supported and respected our police and firefighters, supported our military, and we supported freedom of speech, free and fair elections, and the freedom of citizens to practice their religion without fear of being attacked. There was so much more that united us than divided us. But today, it's mostly conservatives that still hold these values in the highest of esteem. It is conservatives that are still fighting for these fundamental values. And we are angry and saddened by the destruction and abandonment of everything that has made the United States great over the last 250 years. When the Jewish Republican Alliance hosted Candace Owens in March of 2020, a crowd of 1,000 people were there, and both Mitch and I posed for a picture with a swarm of police officers that were there to protect us. We were proud to take that photo and honored and grateful that they were there. Over the last 5 years, we have spoken out against a press that refused to investigate the 2020 election, Hunter and Joe Biden corruption, gain of function research at the Wuhan lab, and the true cause of the pandemic from China. We have spoken out for freedom when rioters and looters were allowed to destroy our communities last summer, while the left blamed the police and threatened anyone who did not stand with the organization Black Lives Matter. We spoke out when protesting in large groups were encouraged during the pandemic, but people were not free to practice their religion, go to the gym, get a haircut, honor their loved ones at a funeral, or have an outdoor graduation. We spoke out when big tech, Facebook, Google, YouTube, and what they did was they censored conservatives and limited free speech while the left cheered them for doing so. We cheered President Trump when the US finally gained energy independence, only to watch Joe Biden shut down pipeline after pipeline, leading to soaring gas prices and inflation. And now Jews are being attacked in the street, synagogues are being vandalized while the left cheers or ignores anti-Semitism, homicides and shootings and violence are out of control in our big cities, and the left preaches anti-American hatred and hatred of Jews on our college campuses, wants to defund the police, and wants to handcuff the police rather than handcuff the criminals. Thousands of criminals have been released from prison, and our borders have been opened, causing an influx of drugs, crime, potential terrorism, and disease, which is making it very difficult for the police. And after all this, last week, Joe Biden said, according to the intelligence community, that white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not crime, not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists. This comment, to me, was the most divisive, inaccurate lie ever told by a sitting president in the last 5 years since we have founded the Jewish Republican Alliance. With thousands of members and guests, I can honestly say I have never met or spoken to a single white supremacist, not one person, not one comment, not one racist, not one white supremacist. In closing, the JRA's support for our good police officers who protect and serve our community is unwavering. We must let them do their job. And we are all so very grateful to those men and women who put on their uniform and their badge every day with great risk to their personal safety to be there for all of us whenever we need them. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to just put on the screen, Tracy, if you can, a picture that I talked about at the Candace Owens event that we had there. We were so happy to be there and felt so secure and safe with all those police officers there. And we commend them for everything they do for our community every day. And now I'd like to introduce fellow JRA co-founder, Mitch Silverman. Mitch.
Hello, JRA community. It is always so great we are together. A couple of years ago, a good friend of mine was about to retire from a local police force, and he invited me to do a ride-along, and I am so grateful I did that. There's so much I can share with you about that day. I'll just keep it as concise as possible. The morning started at 6 a.m. where the police officers got together in a community room and they talked about the neighborhoods they were in charge of. And they knew the people, they knew the troublemakers, the drunks, the people who were just in and out of trouble, not to worry about. It was really amazing how much they knew the neighborhoods and they cared about the community. It was very empowering to see that. Early on, someone made an illegal U-turn in front of us, and my friend with his spidey sense felt something was not right, pulled the guy over. Turns out the guy had a warrant out for his arrest in Orange County. Turns out he was also an illegal alien. How do we know that? Apparently he had an ID that was issued to him by the great state of California that was made it very easy for the police officer to identify him as an illegal alien. So he and his 3 colleagues in the car were all illegal aliens. And then more police showed up. And I have to tell you, the police officers and the illegal aliens were all very respectful to each other. In fact, the police officers even spoke in Spanish to them. So they called the Orange County Police Force, said, hey, he's here. Of course, they're not going to come down. They're not going to drive up from Orange County to get the guy. It wasn't a serious thing. So they had to let him go. And basically they said, make sure you show up when you're supposed to on the court date. They then impounded the car. And what I was told was the cost for him to get the car back was going to be significantly less expensive than if it was a US citizen like you or me. For some reason, I don't know. As the day progressed, we were informed about a property, a house that whose fencing and was destroyed by a vehicle. And my friend did a little homework and investigation and found the car. We went to the house. We were greeted by an adult woman there, a young lady, and she let us in and she said, yeah, my brother was drunk last night. He took dad's car. And he said, well, can we see the car? And sure enough, the damage to the car matched perfectly to the damage that was caused at this guy's house. It was interesting. We just went into this woman's house. She started telling us about her family story and family drama. And it was a really interesting thing. And then he talked about what would happen next. Finally, as the day was progressing, an emergency call came in. He had to turn on the siren, which was kind of a little thrill for me. But we zoomed to a canyon, and apparently a driving instructor and her 15-year-old student went down a ravine. So we got there. My friend jumped out of the car, ran down that ravine, extricated them from the car they were trapped in, and we waited until the paramedics showed up. And I was thinking, all of this happened in one day. Think of the skill set that police officers have to have. They've got to be strong, compassionate, authority figure, empathetic. They've got to be kind of suspicious. They've got to be on guard. And there's a certain party today that has the chutzpah to demonize them and vilify them. It's horrible. They call them names, white supremacists. They call them racist. They call them murderers to their face. And these are the people they'll call first when they're in danger. Mark my words, when they're scared or nervous, the first people they're going to call are not social workers. They're going to call a police officer. Are there bad police officers? Of course there are. Are there bad teachers? Yeah. Are there bad politicians? We know that. Are there even bad doctors and scientists? I don't mean to single anyone out in particular, but as for bad doctors and scientists, one of them who's particularly mendacious, his last name rhymes with grouchy. Anyway, the left as usual has it wrong. And they say their mantra is defund the police. That's downright offensive. They are so off, but only by one word. It's not defund the police, it's defend the police. And we at the JRA wholeheartedly defend the police, the people who put their lives on the line to protect us and keep civil society just. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. So excited. Chief Michel Moore is a 39-year veteran of the LA Police Department. During his tenure, he advanced through the ranks, including Deputy Chief, Commanding Officer of 2 operational bureaus, Assistant Chief, Director of Office of Special Operations, the Office of Support Services, and the Chief Office of Operations. My goodness. In June of 2018, he was appointed and sworn in as the 57th Police Chief for the City of Los Angeles. Chief Moore has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management and a Master's degree in Business Administration. Chief Moore has completed advanced coursework in emergency management, counter-terrorism, process improvement. He's received various notable commendations and awards for his police service, including the department's Medal of Valor, the Police Medal, the Police Star, and the Meritorious Service Medal. Policing with purpose, with compassion, and in partnership is Chief Moore's leadership philosophy and overall focus to support the City of Los Angeles and the community the department serves. Chief, welcome to the show.
So good afternoon. Let me first and foremost start off by, I'm here today at the invitation of the Los Angeles Police Foundation. And my remarks today were to describe and to discuss the state of public safety here in Los Angeles. Recently, the increase in violent crime, what I see as some of the underpinnings or influences of that, course and direction of the department going forward, challenges before us, and certainly an opportunity for Angelenos across all spectrum, political spectrum, to step forward in unity to find a way to ensure that this second largest city in the country that remain a global destination and a world-class city. I'll tell you, I'm disheartened both by Bruce and Mitch's statements today, and I want to sit here and say something that may be offensive to you, but I want you to understand the remarks that you made in the introduction for me today is not consistent as an introduction for a chief of a police agency of a municipality of this size. I'm nonpartisan. I have my own political views, my own internal aspects and opinions regarding our current administration as well as our past one. So I want to make sure that every individual attending this today and hearing to this understand that there's no illegal alien term in Michael Moore's vocabulary. The provincial licenses that are issued, I think it's improved public safety. The criticism of criminal justice reform is warranted, but it needs to be warranted in a manner that's based on facts, that's based on conversations, that allows for some middle ground for us to move towards a common solution. Vilifying this president or the prior president, like saying that today's attacks against Jews and the anti-Semitism that we've seen, terrible outgrowth of it, most recently here in the mid-Wilshire area of the city, that was ignored because of political matters or political parties, frankly disgusts me. I have no place for it, and I'll not tolerate my place here as some kind of forum or platform for you to express those views. You want to talk about facts and figures, you want to talk about what we're actually doing, about real crime, about anti-Semitism, about white supremacists, which is an actual threat, whether you've met one in your life or not. You want to talk about the hate crimes that we've seen with the Asian Pacific Islander nation, the weaponization that we saw this pandemic create in this country. Those are serious matters. And I apologize as a guest before you, but I want to make sure that everyone understands that what JRA just said in the first 15 minutes of my presence here today is not the purpose of my attending, nor would I attend this to support such a platform. You want to have those views, First Amendment right, and everyone's entitled to that, go for it. But don't undermine the public's trust. And a position as important as being a chief of the Los Angeles Police Department by somehow suggesting by my presence here today that I authorize or endorse. Now, if I'm still a guest here today, and you're still interested in hearing some information, I'm happy to go into that. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chief Moore, first of all, let me start off by saying your views do not have to be aligned with our positions. We are certainly open to an open and fair and free dialogue today, nor do we ever assume that things that we say are your views. So I want to make that clear that the views expressed by us are our views and our views only. One of the biggest concerns we have in America right now is difficulty for police to do their jobs. The LA County Sheriff just released a report that increase in crime, homicides are up 95%, grand theft auto, rape, aggravated assault, and arson are all up. And we know that anti-Semitism is on the rise. What can we do and what can the LAPD do specifically to support your efforts to reduce crime? And what can we do to stop the rise of anti-Semitism all over the Los Angeles and this country?
Okay, so thank you. So the increase in homicides in Los Angeles is at 22%. It's not at 95%. LA County Sheriff's Department in unincorporated areas has had an increase of 100%. So first of all, we can understand what we see in increases of crime. Increase in shooting violence, increase in homicides in the city is my number one most pressing concern as chief of this organization. After a decade of seeing homicide at levels well below 300 instances of homicides each year, we started January of 2020 with record lows in violence as well as overall crime, generational lows. You have to go back to the early 60s to find crime rates, but yet we still had far too much gun violence. we still had 255 people that were killed, murdered in the streets of Los Angeles. So we were by no means a nirvana. But what we did see in the months in the onset of the pandemic and the turmoil and crisis and the disasters that we've seen this pandemic infuse upon every aspect of our society is an increase in shooting violence, increase in homicides here in Los Angeles, in LA County, and for that matter, across the country. LA last year saw homicides that rose to 355 versus the year before. That's an increase of 40%. New York City shared in that same experience. Chicago saw a 53% increase. Philadelphia had nearly 500 homicides for a city that's one third our size. Washington D.C., Dallas, no city was exempt. Now those are cities that, as we look at the underlying influences, what was concurrent, what was happening in each of these cities across America. And what we saw in each of the instances was too many guns and too many hands. We saw record gun sales. We saw lines of people buying guns. People buying guns, first-time buyers last year, that was increased at a record rate, and it has continued this year. And many people, as they dig into that, why is that occurring? It's because of people's fear, people's concern for their safety, and people's desires to ensure that they are safe. The most primary responsibility of government is the safety of its population, of its communities, all of its communities. And these gun sales trouble me as a signal that obviously our people's most pressing concern is their safety. A recent AIDS Foundation survey of 500 voters in Los Angeles found that 91%, their most pressing concern was an increase in crime. So this last year, when we look at that increase, we saw similarly increases in auto theft and aggravated assaults, both of which we'd seen an absence of. And while many other aspects, robbery, sexual assault, burglaries, thefts, those all were significantly reduced. And year to date, we still have a 5% reduction in overall crime. The increase in violence is a matter that keeps coming back. And when we look at the underlying influences of it, not just gun violence and not just too many guns and too many hands, but it's been gang members. It's been many people involved in street violence and gang violence. And it's been persons that find themselves homeless or experiencing homelessness and turmoil and violence within the homeless community that we believe also, which has grown exponentially in this last year and a half as a direct attribute of this pandemic. Our efforts as a department, our efforts as a city and as a country has been to deal with the direct results of this pandemic by shoring up our social systems, shoring up the support network, shoring up the types of strategies that reduce violence in our neighborhoods, that reduce the instances of turmoil and disputes, while also ensuring that policing is pursuing those responsible for this gun violence. And our work over this last year, and will continue it through this summer and into the rest of this year and going forward, is showing results. We're removing 25 guns each day from the streets of Los Angeles. These are the proactive, these are the actions of officers who are going out each day, striving to identify those responsible for gun violence and bringing them before the criminal justice system. Additionally, I'm encouraged by recent investments in gang intervention services that are going to significantly increase the presence of community intervention workers to stem the turmoils, the disputes that are occurring many times over social media, many times over nothing more than posts within social media that is erupting and people resorting to violence. I see about 88 participants on today's call, and I asked for them to reflect upon the last year in Los Angeles as they drove about. They may have seen that the speed on our freeways and roadways have increased significantly. And if they've not been involved in an instance of road rage or aggressive driving, I'd like them to raise their hand, because I probably have very few hands out of 88. As we move across the city in this last year, we've never seen freeways, roadways, and places with such closures. We've never seen such an isolation as individuals. But that isolation was a direct result of an effort to save lives. And while I won't get into a debate about the merits of the level and the nature of those across the country of 50 United States, or the 58 counties in this state, or the cities within this county, what I will say is that the aftermath of it, while studies have demonstrated an impact and saving of lives, we're all still learning but the impact it has had on our sense of safety, our sense of security, upon a generation of young people who have not had schools, who've not had opportunities for social development, and for the interaction of these systems that have helped control and achieve the levels of safety that we've experienced. So for LAPD and for the chief, and this is my 40th year, I can look at all this and I can be drafted by it. We can be overwhelmed. And we wouldn't be the only chief in America with that. And I wouldn't be the only Angelino who feels a bit stacked upon as far as, oh my gosh, how are we going to move through this? But I am also heartened by being a man of faith and being a person who believes that this is a country that is built for such challenges. And we do it by standing tall and recognizing what are our core values. What is our mission? And what are we in this moment going to do with those values and this mission? And that's how LAPD is moving forward. We have faced a year of criticism we have not seen to the extent and duration in my career. We've had episodes of it, but nothing, the vilification, the damning, the gaslighting that's happened has been relentless. And our people have suffered from that emotionally as well as physically. We've lost just yesterday, Sergeant Anthony White, the 9th individual to fall, to be lost in line of duty to COVID. 31 years in this organization protecting the streets of Los Angeles, and this pandemic cost him his life. He left behind a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, and a wife who loved him dearly. So this has weighed on all of us. But the message in the Los Angeles Police Department this last year is not to curse the darkness. We've lost 600 of our line personnel to budget cuts. We've lost 250 of our civilians because this is a city that lost 700 million in revenue and cuts that were experienced in every department. But what I choose to do is continue to promote that public safety remains the primary obligation of this city. And I'm proud of the mayor and the city council that just approved for this coming year, this fiscal year that starts July 1st, the ability for me to hire 744 police officers. Just yesterday, we promoted 89 detectives. We released a transfer that I signed today that promoted nearly 69 different positions and command officer positions, followed by another 40 sergeants and an ability to start reactivating parts of our organization that have been under a great deal of stress. We began academy classes in July. That will mean to stem the loss of resources that we've suffered month after month this last year. And our commitment is to keep our personnel focused on reducing violent crime in our 21 geographic areas, to identify those that are carrying weapons, those that are committing acts of violence, and to bring them before the criminal justice system. To also work in partnership with our communities for them not to give up hope on this city. That's our business community, that's our residential community, that's every advocacy group. This is a bright, shining city on a hill. People are striving to be here. And to the critics that want to defund the police, that believe that policing should be abolished, that from JRA, your support and opposition to that, I fully appreciate and ask for your continued support. I've looked at the world. I've traveled in my role as a chief and as a member, a senior member of this organization, and I've seen other governments and I've seen other policing. I've yet to identify anywhere in this great world where there's an absence of police in a democracy. That's not to say that policing gets it right, but the policing in a democracy is directly accountable to elected officials and to the citizen communities in which they serve. That's the model of LAPD. That's the model of 17,000 agencies in American policing. And I'm proud of the vast majority of those men and women who come to live a life of service. We don't always get it right, but we're often called to do things that we have no business being engaged in.
Yeah.
And this country, regardless of their beliefs, political or otherwise, needs to become less lazy about asking and depending on police officers to be everything from a protector to an educator, to a psychologist, to a doctor, to a counselor. And while we need officers, and policing today requires emotional intelligence much more than it does physical capabilities. Our society continues to have 911 for only two services, police or fire. Yet, the vast majority of police calls involve social order issues, mental health, disturbances and disputes that involve people who are experiencing trauma. And we best serve by outreach workers and psychologists and counselors. But those individuals don't find their way into public settings. They find their way into office buildings that work convenient hours between 9 and 5. There's more veterinarian services in this country off hours than there are social services. And so what happens is we get called by 911 because the public needs some help. Individuals need help in the time of crisis. And right now they continue to call the police. So the calls for defunding the police, the second part of that I support, not the first. You don't abolish policing, but we do need to invest in programs that stop the cycle of the loss of life, the turmoil, the disparities that we see in social economic groups, the poverty of this country. We need to invest in those systems. We need to invest more deeply. And that includes having outreach and engagement regularly available at 3 in the morning on Tuesday night, so that policing, when you call 911, there's an alternative to a cop. Now, there'll always be a need for policing. There'll always be a need for cops in this city. And it's not a binary choice. It's not one or the other. But this, unfortunately, the narrative right now, and I do see it changing, and I'm encouraged by that, is that we're getting away as Americans from being a binary choice. This country has always lost when it's a binary choice. When we are a democracy that is uniform, that has our differences, but we work towards common goals, we compromise and we find that common ground. That's where we'll find success. And in policing, where we have a shared responsibility in public safety, we will find better safety and more confidence in police. So we're pegging pretty high. 8 out of 10 Angelenos want policing. They want community policing. 7 out of 10 want us to protect and serve while they support alternative services. So I'm not worried about our job going away because people say they want to defund the police. The concept actually fails on its own presentation. But I do also, as I dismissed the first part, want to bring weight and energy to the second part. And that's the hard part. You gave a program snippet of me that was taken a year ago about finding alternatives. Finding alternatives so that policing is not called upon. So let's check in on that a year later. Well, we've got 5 psychiatric teams. These are mental health workers and community workers that is going to work 24 hours a day in one of 5 vans to respond to people in a state of crisis. They're expected to start this July. That's a year after such an effort was envisioned. I'm encouraged again, a budget that was recently passed is going to invest in a program called CIRCLE, Community Intervention Response Community Led. And what that is it's going to put outreach workers in Venice and Hollywood, experiencing the highest levels of homelessness other than Skid Row in Los Angeles, to have those encounters in place or in lieu of the department. Those need to be built to scale, need to be expanded so that we can experience this alternative and see where it works. And in the middle, and what I project in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years, is we'll realize, again, it's not a binary decision. It's not how many crisis response teams, alternative services do we have versus how many police we have, because you're going to find, as we did 30 years ago, when we established the system-wide mental health assessment response teams made up of a police officer who sits alongside a Department of Mental Health clinician, licensed clinician, and they respond to radio calls for service. And they're first in now. And in being first in, that clinician helps inform the police officer, and the police officer helps protect the clinician. And it's a better outcome. 3 legs on a stool. That's where we need going forward. That's the strategies of the city and county, I believe, and it's something I wish to bring attention to. And I look forward to your questions here today, and I thank you for your patience with me.
Chief Moore, I'm really heartened by some of the things you said. It's very, very enlightening. Early on, you said something about you had no tolerance for any administration turning a blind eye to anti-Semitism. And I want to tell you that that means a lot to us to hear you say that. For those in our audience, we're not all Jews in the Jewish Republican Alliance, but mostly Jews. What can you tell us to maybe help put us at ease, feeling more comfortable in the city in and around LA, so we don't feel like we're going to be attacked while we're having dinner? I mean, give us your insight to that. And if there's a little encouragement and hope, I can tell you're a very positive person.
So the instance that there was two instances that occurred about 2 weeks ago. One of a Jewish individual that was chased down by a group of individuals in a caravan of cars on a Monday night. Fortunately, he was able to elude them, and he did not suffer any grave or serious injury. And then the second night, a group of young men that were having dinner on Melrose area when they were viciously attacked by, again, a roving band of a caravan of cars. Palestinian flags were being flown in both instances. This was the initial days after the demonstrations regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the turmoil that that's on the world stage that was occurring the Gaza Strip. Our investigative efforts was swift. The victims cooperated. We sought CCTV and other video and evidentiary items and identified two of the three individuals that we believe are directly responsible for those attacks. And they've been arrested and brought before the criminal justice system. And they're facing hate crime enhancements for the crimes because they were anti-Semitic. They were driven by their hatred. And I believe, and I look forward to the district attorney's office filing those enhancements as part of not just the assault that they had committed, the felony assault, but the added enhancements. So the enforcement posture of the Los Angeles Police Department, the Jewish community can take comfort, is that we take instances of hate at the highest level of priority. Secondly, in addition to that investigative response, was our response by added patrols, by dedicating units from other parts of the city that were not seeing these instances to ensure that people had a sense of safety. As they walked to the synagogues, as they moved about the area that were known to be Jewish communities, that there was a sense that LAPD stood there with them and would protect them and would ensure that we would minimize any opportunity that people might think that they could prey upon the Jewish people. Lastly, and most importantly, I was proud of the network of leaders within the Jewish communities, because the Jewish community is not a single community. It's a cascading of communities. But I was encouraged by the network that was automatically activated as these events began unfolding, and the communications to reassure all the stakeholders within these various communities that LAPD was not looking at this in some passive manner, that we weren't minimizing it or excusing it or taking sides, if you will, on any aspect. We would do the same for an attack against a Palestinian, a Muslim, a Sikh, a Christian. These are individual rights in this city are without such identities. But when people use such identities to attack people's rights to exist, there'll be no tolerance for it within this department. And I'm proud of the membership of this organization that represents the cosmopolitan nature of the city, because they look at these, and I believe, in a similar fashion. And there's not to say that there's not people who are more deeply moved than others, but the point of this is our responsibility as the most visible form of government is that when hate in these instances, these discriminations occur, that we act promptly. Now you've got 23 questions or answers in here. Is it your desire that I work through those or what?
We'll do that for you.
We'll do that for you.
Because I want to address with whoever this anonymous attendee is at 1217, that if there's no illegal alien in his terminology, what do we call them? I call them people, call them undocumented individuals, because a person's alien status or the person's immigrant status in the state of Los Angeles is not a police matter. Maybe a matter for the federal government, and it just says it's not a matter of whether or not you pay your taxes, and your tax cheat is what your immigration status. It does become a criminal matter when the person is deported or commits a violent felony, is deported, then re-enters. And then that's when the federal government gets a warrant for that person's arrest, and we enforce those vigorously.
Chief Moore, just wanted to point of clarification and a follow-up question. I read some statistics about increase in crime. Just want to let you know where I got it from. It's a reporter from Fox LA. His name is, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, Bill Malugian. He tweeted all these stats that were up, where I quoted the 95% increase, and tagged the LA County Sheriff's Department with that tweet. So, I trust your ability to know the accurate stats. I'm just letting you know that I didn't make them up. That's where I got it from.
I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't, Bruce. I don't. The problem is, there's things about stats, right? Lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Exactly.
You can use them for your own interest. But I want to be clear too that, again, homicides are not up 100% or 90% or 95% in Los Angeles City. The unincorporated areas of the county, certainly the sheriff is and his responsibilities over public safety in those areas. I do not minimize the loss of life in any part of the city. And certainly the overarching issue, whether it be the county unincorporated areas, Long Beach, Glendale, City of Los Angeles, all of us are seeing, without question, an increase in shooting violence and the increase in loss of life. It is our most pressing concern, regardless of the percentage.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to also echo Mitch's comments on your support and your policing to try to keep us safe, ending anti-Semitism, and putting extra forces out. That means a lot to us, and we commend you for that. With all the attacks on police over the last year and longer, one of my concerns is police morale, and police who may decide, I can't take this anymore because I'm getting attacked, it's not worth it, and retiring early. What is being done to make sure we stand up for the officers in uniform?
So internally, this has been one of the most stressful years in decades. And so officer wellness, officer resilience, their families' resilience, their wellness has been critical issues for us, for me as a chief. There's been, during this period of time, we've had employee affiliated organizations that have risen up and sought added support and assistance from our psychologists by identifying strategies in which to cope and deal with this gaslighting, that a term that I use. I think it's a strategy that's been used against policing. That when you start questioning your own existence, your own meaning, and certainty of what you believe in your life, there is no more greater psychological trauma than that. We know that. Frankel's talked about the art of meaning, or the value of meaning in one's life. And so our recurring tone with our people is to keep them centered. Our mission, our North Star, is to protect and serve the people of Los Angeles, and to recognize that in this atmosphere of criticism, to keep it in perspective, that their work is still meaningful. Thousands of people call us each day. Hundreds of thousands of people support law enforcement. And while we are also faced with criticism, and at times warranted, it is by no means representative of this entire department or even this profession. We see in law enforcement, and one of the challenges for a young person today who's 25, 30 years of age, I get to say that when I'm as old as I am, but they're in this profession, and they go for the nobility of it, the fact that it matters, their work. They're here for a purpose. Yeah, they have compassion. They partner with communities, and they recognize that we're all in this together to leave this place better than we found it. And yet they feel people that are shouting and screaming ugly and vile things at them, sometimes physically attacking them, but constantly criticizing them with no solution going forward, as like, maybe I've chosen the wrong profession. And so our task and responsibilities internally is to do everything we can to counter that narrative, and to remind them of the work they do, the importance of it, the fact that they make a difference, they change lives, they save lives. And so we've done that, we were doing that internally, but we have seen our calls to our psychologists go up, both by members of organizations as well as our family. Now, I'm encouraged by the American Recovery Act, which is affording the city the ability with funding to restore hiring, to allow us to begin promoting people again, to be able to fill billets of what it means to provide for public safety. And I think that's going to help us as well. I've encouraged for us to reduce the rhetoric, to reduce the attacks, and for us to find a way going forward. The sun came up this morning. God gave us all that blessing to see it, is to move forward in it and not look and keep looking in the back and keep complaining or remarking about the mistakes there. We shouldn't ignore our past. And I'm not suggesting that people shouldn't be accountable for decisions they make, but for policing, not to get embroiled in all this rhetoric going back and forth. And so what I need the public, and I ask your membership to do, is find opportunities to simply say thank you or say hello, to recognize them, give them a nod, give them a thumbs up, let them know you love them, you appreciate them, and that you need them. They hear the other side. And so, this is the last adage I'll say, and I know I have business people around here. You serve 1,000 people a day. Maybe you serve 10,000. You get one bad customer experience. What do you worry about as far as the reputation of your business? It's that one that will go viral. It's the one that you'll have to chase down and try to rectify. And policing's the same way. We have 750,000 people in this profession, 17,000 agencies. 90% of them have a dozen police officers in their agency. No universal background standards, no use of force standards, no consistencies on training. We have officers that I've seen get fired in an agency in Oregon, only to be hired in Tennessee. And so there's the efforts with passing universal standards, passing and improving the profession overall, so that agencies such as LAPD, which are a leader in 21st century policing, do not suffer the consequences of a man who murders an individual named George Floyd with a caustic and callous manner, that not represent the men and women of this organization. And that exists today, in my view, because much like hospital networks, you see good medicine and you see bad medicine. And in fact, I suspect there's probably some doctors in this group here. You see medical groups that are there for profit, and you see medical groups that are there for service. But yet, when you see malpractice in medicine, which happens every day in this country, we do not talk about defunding the medical practice. We talk about getting rid and culling from from this profession those that fall short of its standards. So from them, for your group, I ask for their support. How they can support us is by ensuring our elected officials hear from them. Not so much from JRA, but they hear from them as just regular Angelinos. Because again, we have a tendency, because we think our advocacy as a group is going to give us a greater voice, but we have a tendency in our electeds that look to matters of advocacy of left or right. And they believe that they represent majorities that in many instances they don't. So individual voices here in Los Angeles, 4 million plus, I believe can change the narrative, and has already on our city council and our other elected officials. The other matter you can do to help us is that we are in challenging times on a fiscal side, and we are attempting to modernize technology that is decades obsolete. Today, we complete paper reports, and if you're, again, a business owner, if you were to look at the way our business operations run, you would think you're back in the 90s. And we're in a modernization effort. It's one of the major initiatives I started with the support of our police foundation, Dana Katz, who helped me arrange this today, or assisted me and invited me to this meeting. Their foundation has dedicated millions of dollars to help us over the last 20 years to fill gaps when there's a shortage of public funding, when there's a lapse or a gap, and there's meaningful efforts in our technology, in our training, in our youth programs. So the Los Angeles Police Foundation also stands ready and can answer and help you with understanding ways in which you can help us at a local station or more strategically across our entire organization. Just yesterday, I was looking at a host of unmet needs in which the foundation has stepped into in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to change policing in all parts of the city for the better.
Chief Moore, I am so thrilled to hear about your concern for the mental and well-being of your officers. I couldn't agree with you more. For you to be the one in charge with that deep of a concern for your men and women who serve, God bless you. That's fantastic. There's so many questions in the audience, as you know. There's one that's interesting from Jordan R. He's commenting that you had mentioned enhancements, which sound terrific. His question, I guess he's an LA resident, I am not. He says RDA is opposed to sentencing enhancements. Again, I'm not an LA resident. He asked if you'd please comment on that.
Sure. So George Gascon, our district attorney for LA County, he and I have talked about this, that in my belief, for the safety and the safety of Los Angeles, for the impact of consequences for individuals involved in hate crimes, involved in serious acts of gang violence, that enhancements exist for the purposes of punishing those individuals for those type of motivated assaults above a simple robbery, a robbery motivated by hate or motivated by gang violence, that the people of California have said is deserving of added incarceration, both from a punishment standpoint, but also a deterrence standpoint. That if you're involved in a hate crime, that it's no longer just a fist fight in the street. If it's motivated by hate, anti-Semitism, if you're anti-Muslim, anti-LGBTQ, that deserves an added punishment, because it's a certain amount of evilness in this. It's not just an impulse, but you have in your heart, there's a core that's rotten. But the other aspect of this is every community that have hate crimes enhancements protecting those communities have had a history in law enforcement of believing law enforcement doesn't care, that law enforcement is a bit tone deaf, that we are in fact sanctioning the state, that we're not going to act on this. And so enhancements were brought about to demonstrate to victims that society holds this type of crime as even more abhorrent or more concerning, distressing than a simple robbery or a simple assault in the street. So I believe that those enhancements are warranted. Now I understand in talking with Mr. DA Gascon, who, by the way, he and I worked together 20 years ago when he was an assistant chief here, or nearly 20 years ago. He left here in 2006. And I actually worked for him as a deputy chief in the San Fernando Valley. So we're friends and colleagues, but we differ on hate crime enhancements and on sentence enhancements. I believe that the killing of a police officer has enhancements over a murder. Why? Because there's 236 names on the wall in Los Angeles where people have died in the line of duty, and they've stood for the values of public safety, and they sacrificed their life in the service of this city. And the contract we gave with them is that we do everything we can to protect them and to their families. So I think those enhancements are there as part of that contract. And that's why I advocate for it. And we have clear communications. He and I are both committed, as is Sheriff Villanueva, to the safety of the people of this county, and me to the safety of this city. So I'm committed to that. Doesn't mean we don't have differences, but as we all do, as we've demonstrated here today. But I believe we can find that common ground and move forward.
Thank you, Chief Moore. We have a question from Madeline T, which is she's asking you to address BLM, Antifa, and then the other issue that we have in California and locally, where we had reports of a large number of criminals being released prematurely, and how that affects policing in our area.
So let's talk about Black Lives Matter and Antifa first. I would not put those two people anywhere in the same group. Antifa is an anti-government organization who is hell-bent on essentially abolishing this democracy, this government. They use black bloc, meaning they mask, they carry weapons, they attack any visible form of government. They believe that capitalism is wrong, and they should believe it should be abolished. And so Antifa is a threat to this country. And it is an organization that I worry about, and I've seen on the ground here in Los Angeles attack police officers, commit acts of arson and looting. Black Lives Matter in the Los Angeles Police Department, the core essence to me when you hear the words Black Lives Matter, and I've not read their constitution, but Black lives do matter. And it is a concern when we see lives lost, and those including Black Americans. And so their commitment to ensure that America recognizes the impact on Black lives and the interactions with police concerns me as well. So we have shared common ground there. We differ on some of their strategies of how they deliver that message. And we also differ on some of their expressions, particularly the issue of abolishing the police or defunding the police. But lastly, my 3 years in this office, and before that, my predecessor, Chief Charlie Beck, we've always said, and will continue to say, the Los Angeles Police Department stands ready at any opportunity to sit down with leadership or anyone from Black Lives Matter and talk about a path forward. To talk about how do we find our common ground and work towards achieving results that are going to improve the lives of Black Americans as well as others in our society. Lastly, the instances of early release of individuals in state and local custody. I'm significantly concerned. Prior to the onset of the pandemic, we had tens of thousands of additional individuals that were in state prison and county jails. And because of instances of the pandemic and guidance from the CDC, there were early releases. And the state government and as well as locals have done a prioritization, a rationing of how do we open up space in local prisons and jails to safeguard those that are in custody from this pandemic. Well, this pandemic is ending. And it is my hope that people are going to serve sentences upon being found guilty of crimes against others, crimes against the society, and they'll face the consequences for that. That is the American justice. And at the same time, I do believe that those coming out of prison, we need to have supportive services. We need to have the ability to ensure that they don't land and become homeless. What's happened in this last year is that with these early releases, in an effort to safeguard these prisoners and minimize, if you will, the risk to them, as well as calculate a risk to the public, is there's not been those supportive services. There's not been the housing. There's not been the things to ensure that they can safely reenter society. And so we've seen as part of the exponential growth in homelessness, these same individuals now living in unsheltered existence because of a lack of those supportive services. And that's not good for public safety, and it's not good for those individuals as well. And it concerns me, and I've expressed that and will continue to.
Chief
we have
Moore,
about 3 or 4 minutes at the most.
Yeah,
Yes,
I was going to say,
up.
Chief Moore, I wanted to thank you for being here. I know we don't agree on everything politically, but I have to say there's so much that we do agree on, and we are big supporters of the LAPD. We know you have a tough job, and we're here to let you know that you have a friend in the Jewish Republican Alliance always, and we're here to help. And so thank you for coming on and allowing us to ask you the tough questions that we did.
Very well. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank
My
you,
pleasure.
Chief. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here today. We hope to be able to announce in the next week or so a big event that we're planning. We'll keep you posted on that, but we're trying to get back live with you. In the meantime, what can you do? Stay informed, get involved, and make a difference. Now more than ever, we need your support. We need members. We need people to go on and support us financially so we can do and continue the great work we can do. Please go to our website, jewishrepublicanalliance.org, make a donation, get involved, and help us be your voice in this very difficult time. Until we meet again, thank you all for being here. Have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.